just an understanding of that's the way it is. Okay, now I will move to the last section in which we talked about yoga in the Upanishads, we talked about yoga from the Yoga Sutras. But even what we call yoga often in the US is a very limited definition of it. Because if we go to the Bhagavad Gita, which is the other source, there you will find 18 chapters. Each of the 18 chapters is called a yoga. You know that? It's called Dhyana Yoga Dhyaya, Bhakti Yoga Dhyaya, right? Everything is yoga in that, right? But you can distill the paths in the Gita to 4. And they are listed, those 4: Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Karma Yoga. So Raja Yoga is what we talked about for the most part. The Yoga Sutras talk about that. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion, right? And Dhyana Yoga is the yoga of knowledge, Vedanta typically. Karma Yoga is the yoga of action. So you don't have to go to a yoga class to do any yoga. You are continually doing yoga in every way if you follow any of these paths, and these are all genuine yogis. Okay? And the second thing that I want to say is that these paths are not meant to be followed to the exclusion of one another. They're all meant to be practiced together. Right? So you may do Raja Yoga in the morning. You may have an attitude of devotion, and that devotion doesn't have to be to any particular god. It doesn't have to be to a Vedic god. It can be in any tradition. If you're devoted to Jesus Christ or you're devoted to Allah, all that is bhakti. It's all devotion. There's nothing that says you shouldn't have devotion. The point is, you should have some devotion as an integral part of it. You choose. In fact, in the Yoga Sutra it says, Yatha abhimata va, whatever is pleasing to your mind, use that as your focal point of devotion. And then Jnana Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga is, of course, without the wisdom that dawns from meditation, there is no realization. And finally, Karma Yoga, which you need. In Karma Yoga, what you're doing is actually renouncing the fruits of your action. So it is, you have to live in the world, you have to act in the external world. But this notion of good karma and bad karma, yogis are not so fond of. All karma is mixed if you're not realized. If you're realized, that yogi has no karma. The actions of a yogi are neither black or white. They are not Krishna Shukla. They do because they've renounced the actions. They've done it in the spirit of actions for consciousness or the greater good. So that is Karma Yoga. So these 4 are like 4 lanes on a highway. And you need to ride all 4 lanes, changing lanes whenever you want, depending on the circumstance, right? But it is, I think, very limited to just think of yoga as going to yoga class. This is not going to be very useful. You have to cultivate all the 4 paths carefully. And then if you think of the analogy of this 4-lane highway going up a mountain, right? When you go to the apex of the mountain, the width of the road is going to become very narrow, right? So they all merge into one. That's why whether you follow any path, you take a great devotee, a saint who's a devotional person, a person like Shankaracharya who's a Jnana Yogi, they all say the same thing, because at the top there's no difference. Right? So it's pointless to debate. Right? But there are some benefits. So I listed what is a training. Raja Yoga trains physical body, breath, etc. It gives you a well-conditioned body, knowledge of the inner sheets, gives you one-pointed mind. There has to be an attitude of devotion and surrender. Without that, the final buddhi cannot be pierced and surrendered to some greater consciousness. Jnana Yoga is sharpening the intellect. Ultimately, you need the wisdom. You need a conceptual framework within which you're operating. Just sitting otherwise for hours in meditation is not going to give you. You have to have that conceptual framework. And Karma Yoga, of course, you have to act in the external world. Nobody can just be meditating all the time. Right? So that is the summary of the gist of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, I'll admit, that's an amazingly short summary. You can take one verse from the Bhagavad Gita and give 10 lectures on it. And I've tried to condense it in the interest of time, and because this is mainly an informational thing. So, I'd like to give you a sort of a table in which we can look at these various paths and systems. So, on the first column, you see yoga as we know it, Raja Yoga, Vedanta and Tantra. I talked about these 3 systems and they are interconnected. each of them plays into giving each of those paths that we talked about. So each of these systems contributes to the paths. So when you practice yoga, it's an integral, Raja Yoga is an integral part of it. In yoga there is bhakti, there is surrender to Ishvara, the supreme consciousness. There is also jnana, there is knowledge. There is discrimination between the real and the unreal, right? Cultivation of this thing called viveka khyati, there is even knowledge aspect. And there is also karma yoga, because the yoga of action is there in the Yoga Sutra. The way you act, conduct yourself is regulated. If you take Vedanta, it also has something from each of these four parts. There is an aspect of meditation. There is an aspect that you believe in the original Vedas, Shruti. It contains devotional aspects as well. And there is, of course, it is the pinnacle of knowledge, jnana yoga, knowledge. And it also tells you through the Bhagavad Gita that you should practice your actions very carefully. And if you go to Tantra, you see the same thing. So the whole thing is like a matrix. And what I feel when we approach yoga, particularly I think in the US and in these days, in modern times, there's a tendency to kind of think it is some little pocket on its own. And what I was trying to bring out through these discussions is that they're very interconnected. Many of these source texts are available online for free. Translations are there. One can read them and practice. If you have any interest, I can point you to sources that I found useful. I might even have a sign-up sheet in case you want to just get a recording of the first session if you missed it, or we'll see if this one comes out and you can have that if you'd like. And I think I'll stop there and let you have questions for the remainder of the 10 minutes, because that will be more useful.